From Chicago's Can TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
Hi, welcome to the show. I'm Ken Davis, and it is Republican Week in the United States and here in Illinois, too. And so we decided that the way to do this is to have a Republican come to the program and explain to us all of these very odd things that seem to be happening on television. And so here's what happened. The Republican Party, any big organization, you always have to identify one person who you can't have with the mothership in case of some kind of disaster, like a hurricane hits or something. And I think the Republicans designated Chris Robling to stay back in Illinois just in case.
Well, the truth is, no one unlocked my fossil drawer at the Field Museum, and so I was. And then by the time you needed somebody from the show,
right.
I was out. I was on the prowl.
I pick up the phone and I call Chris, assuming that I'm going to, find him on the floor of the Republican convention brokering deals for Illinois or something. And no, he's right here in Chicago. So he said, "Come on down. Let's talk about all this." So, Chris Robling.
Happy to be here.
Political operative,
One time.
a political consultant, just a media guy, all sorts of things. Glad to have you on the show. So, Chris, where do we start? You start. I'm fascinated by. I've been watching the Republican convention, and I have been just blown away by some of the wattage, by some of the power that has been that we've been seeing, particularly obviously Paul Ryan last night. I mean, I thought that was a brilliantly written speech and a terrific speech. As you probably know, I am not a card-carrying Republican,
right. So
it's hard for me to say nice things about the Republican Party. But I got to tell you, though, that something that, as a sort of a stagecraft guy,
yes.
There's something about that convention that feels really cold and distant to me. It feels different from conventions, and I've seen every convention since, God knows when. This one just feels odd somehow.
Well, funny that you should mention that. I had the privilege of going to the convention in St. Paul 4 years ago. I was there for the final two nights, which was the Sarah Palin night and the John McCain night. That St. Paul hockey arena was designed. Norm Coleman, who became senator and is now not senator, but he was mayor of St. Paul at the time. They love hockey up there, and they wanted to have a hockey arena to beat the band, and that gave the entire feeling up there a great intimacy. Everybody was very close to what was happening, and you were really on. Even if you were in the upper levels, you were really close and watching right straight down. This is a little more open, and there is a little less definition to the space, so I can relate to what you are saying. But of course, that stagecraft issue, along with another one that turns up in the blogs about the moving lava, for anybody who hasn't seen, and we're taping this before the Romney acceptance speech.
That's right.
There's kind of a background of flowing blue or flowing red, and they switch them whenever they want to. And some people,
or sometimes it's a wood panel.
It's kind of moving the molten lava background. But you know what? What's most important is the text of the convention and its receipt by the viewers at home. And I'd say, secondly, what's most important is its receipt by everybody in the hall.
Right.
Because those are your activists. Those are the folks who've got to get back to the neighborhoods.
I just bring it up, though, because as I said, I offer my congratulations to y'all on the Paul Ryan speech, because I thought it was it was a barn burner. But the weird part about it was that when you're watching it on TV, the response is not as overwhelming as it probably is in the hall. You're not getting that sense of it. So I think that was a miss on just stagecraft, but that's really neither here nor there.
But we know the Ryan speech. I say we, meaning here the Republicans, and I don't know if you would agree with this, but we know that the Ryan speech was an enormous success, not just because of how it gave voice to many of our beliefs about what needs to happen in the country and why, But because the Obama campaign reacted so viscerally, and so negatively, and just minutes before coming over here, I got an email from the campaign manager. I get these emails. I got an email from John Kerry this morning and from Jim Messina, and sometimes I get them from Barack Obama and even Mitt Romney, but as we all do. And the email from Messina, the campaign manager of the Barack Obama campaign.
I just saw it.
Well, okay, it was a complete repudiation. Everything in the Paul Ryan speech was a lie, et cetera, et cetera. And you're seeing that from other commentators and people who are aligned with the Obama campaign. That says to us it's working, it's very successful, it's hitting home, and it's probably changing minds. The amount of derision with which these events are met is indicative of not necessarily the actual effect, but the perceived effect over in the Prudential building.
We both know that the only purpose for these political conventions anymore is changing perception. I mean, it's sort of creating this video image that creates a storyline.
I think there are some other subsidiary purposes, but I think the main thing now is a TV event.
Right.
It's a TV event that is creating content that can then be purposed and repurposed in the lingo, and that content is going to go out, and so hopefully also going to motivate everybody in the hall.
And I'll stop lavishing praise on the Republicans after this, but also I was really impressed with the Ann Romney speech. I mean, I thought that was a masterful piece of perception management, let's say. Sort of like, no, my husband really is a very smart, warm man. I know, I've been married to him for 40 years. That kind of thing.
It is always true that wives can say things, I should say spouses can say things about candidates that no one else can say. And spouses can provide appropriately a glimpse of the person. And that's been true, that was true at times, say, Bill and Hillary Clinton. We saw a lot of that there. I mean, it has always been the case, and that's very legitimate. I think what we saw with the Ann Romney speech, and I have to say, losing the first day because of the concerns about what was then a tropical storm Isaac and became a Hurricane Isaac, and luckily it seems to be managed pretty well in the Gulf region, but it helped.
It did. Well,
losing the first day
I
helped.
I think there's a lesson to be learned here. We can maybe make these things 2-day events and be done with it.
Well, it's the old adage that, if you want me to speak for half an hour, I can do it tomorrow. If you want me to speak for 5 minutes, you got to give me 6 weeks notice.
Right.
And what they did with going from 4 to 3 was they refined things. And I would say that Ann Romney hit a home run. I thought it was very interesting, the sort of the arc of that speech. But in addition to that, I have to give credit to a lot of these lesser-known officials and activists, or very well-known activists and officials like Condi Rice. I thought that, we got a great speech from Condi Rice. We got a great speech from Tim Pawlenty. The governor of New Mexico is very poorly known nationally. Got a moment. She is the first Latina governor in the history of the United States. She's a Republican, and she's a Republican who converted, as I did, from the Democratic Party to the Republican, and she brings a special testimony with that. So I think there's been a lot of great content in that regard.
There has, and of course now the challenge that you folks face is that your standard bearer has to come up tonight and speak, and he's got to at least rise to somewhere near the level of the people who preceded him, and that might be tough for him.
Well, I think that he's been doing well. I think he's been getting better, and I think that we're going to see a very solid speech. And I think at some level, this is going back to the Carter-Reagan analogy of 1980, which is not fully descriptive, but I think indicative. You see in Mitt Romney a person of very significant capability. I don't think there's much question about that. He's a very capable person. He's executed leadership roles. Not just in business, but because of Massachusetts and the Olympics, people can say he's executed leadership roles in public life and obviously also in religious life, in his church. So he's capable and he's a leader. Now, does he have a plan? What are you going to get? Yeah. What will distinguish? And I think this was one of the great steps taken by Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan actually did 2 things last night that I think are going to go down in history. I think they'll be noted 10, 20 years from now. Number one, he made he finally, conclusively, ultimately, and for all time, obliterated a glimpse of light between Republicans and Medicare. He made Medicare part of the Republican credo last night in a way that, we can talk about it, but he made Medicare part of the Republican credo last night in a way that I think conclusively repudiates the idea that Medicare's over here and Republicans are trying to undermine it. Now we can get into that, but that was the text of his speech.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again,
right.
I think we are talking at different levels here,
right.
because you and I both have been message guys for a long time, and as a message guy, I can say, yeah, boy, that was beautiful handling of the message. We are really on your side, old folks. Don't worry about a thing. We're not going to just have you go stand in line for 4 hours for a coupon. We really love you, and we're going to keep that. Yeah. Okay.
We'll get back to that.
Yeah.
The other thing he did last night, he actually transformed the Ronald Reagan question of, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? He said, what will change in the next 4 years?
Right.
And I think that is devastating.
I agree with that.
I think that's devastating.
A powerful use of language.
Right. So the Ryan speech,
and also, by the way, the appeal to young people, I thought was incredible. The thing
Sure.
about your laying in your parents in your old bedroom and your parents looking at your fading poster of Barack Obama and wondering what are the next 4 years going to be. Beautiful use of speechcraft and snarkiness all at the same time.
Well, and this sets up the Romney conclusion. That is the predicate, and Romney is the solution. And the solution has to come tonight, and the solution has to be, it doesn't have to be every detail.
Yeah,
it
good
doesn't
luck with
have
that.
to it doesn't have to be every detail. It has to be a roadmap to a prosperous and growing economy. And I think that if he can meet that burden tonight, then the nature of this race is conclusively transformed, and we're in for a very interesting 80 days, starting with sort of the next 5 days in Charlotte.
Yeah. Well, it is very interesting to look at Paul Ryan and say that, is it possible that this was the Barack Obama 2004 speech? That speech last night, because if they lose, this might be the best thing that happens to him. If they lose 4 years from now, he is the Barack Obama of 2016. I mean, he's the hope and change guy, right?
He is terrific, and he has done a lot in his sort of 14 years in Congress, and he's distinguished himself in many respects. But I also think, coming out of the last 2 nights and sort of what we've seen, the evolution of the vice presidential vetting process, et cetera, when you have people like Susana Martinez, the governor of New Mexico, the governor of Nevada, you have some of these, Nikki Haley, you're seeing a Republican bench that is born of, to use a phrase, structural federalism, which is deep in our hearts, that is, I think, considerably broader and deeper than anything we see on the Democratic side.
Well, again, I'm not enjoying this show today, folks. Let's see, we still got another 15 minutes of this.
Come on.
Yeah, yes, you're right about that too. One of the things that has really been bothering me is that the Democratic side does not have the depth and the breadth of a bench that I'm seeing with the Republicans. However, having said all of that,
okay.
You're quite right when you say that I don't think that there's enthusiasm in that big room for Mitt Romney.
Oh,
I don't think it's there.
Well,
and I don't, and that's the hardcore. I mean, when you get out 2 and 3 concentric circles away from there, you're finding people who are looking at this guy and saying, if I have to make this choice, I think I'll go with. I'm not going to switch horses in the middle of the stream.
Well, I think you've put your finger on really the political question of the hour. I will say that I think Romney has made better use of the period between clinching the nomination and actually accepting it than, say, for instance, Senator McCain, who's a revered figure and an American hero. Senator McCain did a lot of things in that period that no one ever really caught up with or understood, or no one got the memo and weren't really sure what was going on. Mitt Romney began and this again speaks to the person. You know, he I think saw, I've got to raise money because Obama has shown that he can raise money. He said, I've got to unify this party because I think he understood that he was not exactly somebody who came into the primaries and went through the primaries with 67% support. He was always a minority. He was always a plurality winner, not a majority. Okay. So, I mean, he understood that. And so you saw in that period between clinching and acceptance a very systematic outreach by Romney himself personally to individuals all over the country and to groups. And I think that culminated in the Paul Ryan thing. So on the Republican side, in terms of the Republican Party and its core activists and its precinct workers, I think there's a lot of revving up about Romney. I think people are really ready to go with this thing. Now, out in the public, we've still got to get out there and campaign. That's why he's got to go up there tonight and hit his own home run.
What's going to be most interesting, of course, now is that, you know, a week from now we're going to see the other side and what they're going to come up with, and it's going to be very interesting to see how they sort of circle the wagons around this Romney thing, and particularly around the Paul Ryan thing, because the message that Paul Ryan gave last night to my ears was crisp and clear and a sort of a clarion call, but fundamentally based on erroneous information and I would say even in some cases just downright inaccuracies, but nevertheless a clear and pure message. And that's going to be very difficult to overcome when you have the economy in the way that it is right now. So that's where we're going to be, where we're going to have to be watching next week.
Well, and I think that, and I say this as an American, not as a partisan, but I think that the president and his party has to, they face the greater burden.
Sure.
And the reason they face the greater burden is because they're no longer on the outside throwing stones.
Right.
They have the 40 months or whatever it is, 50 months of record, okay, that they have to somehow account for. And I think that they are now going to be faced not just with the fact that they've got a record that has been difficult to talk about. And, you know, you and I have known each other for 25 years, and I'm not a debate point scorer. So let's just say they've got a record that they have to somehow figure out what to do with. And to use your word, they're now facing a very clear statement from the other side. So they have to kind of solve both problems. Now, I don't know how they're going to do it. I have a sense of how they're going to do it. And I think that if they go negative in their convention, then you will see exactly the same result from their convention that you saw from the Bob Dole convention of the Republicans in San Diego in 1996. It was one of the few conventions and that was, I think, the Pat Buchanan culture war.
That was the culture war speech, yeah.
Okay, and what you ended up with out of that convention was a negativity and a sense, I think, in the viewing public that the Republican Party had been unremittingly negative about Clinton.
Right.
They didn't give Clinton credit for some of his collaboration with Gingrich after the Republicans had taken hold in the first 2 years, after the first 2 years of the Clinton administration. So you had a negative perception, and negative conventions yield no bounce. So if the Republican thing, if Romney hits a home run tonight, in our eyes or in the eyes of the viewers, and if the Democrats go negative, then I think you could be looking at unusual poll results as early as mid-September.
Do you expect a positive poll bounce coming out of this convention?
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
how much?
If Romney does as well as Mrs. Romney did, if Romney does as well as Paul Ryan did, then I think you are going to see an uptick, in stated support for Romney, probably on the order of 10% of what he currently has. So if he currently has 45%, look for 5, 6 points, something like that. I also think you're going to see a downtick in this Romney is not likable, or the likability thing, which is, you know, that has to be paired up with a lot of other, and you can't just look at one poll result and never sort of describe an entire phenomenon. But likability has been this sort of discussed Achilles heel. I don't know if it is an Achilles heel, but it's been discussed. I think the likability factor is creeping down right now. If he does a good job tonight, if he can create some connection.
You know what's interesting about that is that I think that the likability factor very well may creep down, but that doesn't necessarily translate into, and I think maybe that means I can vote for him. Because the general sense among those who don't like Romney is not so much that he's unlikable, it's that he is a rapacious capitalist SOB who has been firing people and ripping companies apart for all the, you know, all that rap, which is not going to go away. And so I think that I'm not sure that just making him more likable is going to convert people, the few people who need to be converted. I don't think that's going to convert them. Just, oh, he's a nicer guy than I thought he was.
Well, and if I'm glad we've got time, because I now want to take a couple of minutes to describe what I consider to be the dynamics between the parties in this election. May I?
Yeah.
This to me, I think, is central. We all understand that there's a base for the Republicans and there is a base for the Democrats, and then there is the middle. And the bases are sort of activist support, so to speak. And it's what you get if you're a Democrat and you're running for president and you don't fall on your face, or what you get as a Republican, same situation. We covered the Harold Washington years at WBEZ.
Yeah.
Okay. David Axelrod, friend of this program, friend of yours, associate of mine, you know, or acquaintance.
David Axelrod, yes.
is running the Harold Washington Coalition at a national level. Okay, that is what this campaign is for Barack Obama. And by the way, I don't think any of the biographies of Obama have paid enough attention to the relationship between Obama as a community organizer and this titanic figure who was Harold Washington. That's another story. Anyway, on the issue of the campaigns, what Obama now needs to do is increase registration, just as Harold demanded in the fall of 1982.
If you want me to run, you're going to have to get 100,000.
Amen. Yeah. We remember the same thing. So number one is increase registration, and number two is increase turnout within that higher registration. Now, let me just...
Increasing registration is becoming more and more difficult in states that your party controls, but that again is a half-hour discussion.
As a former election administrator, I beg to differ, but that's another program, as you say. Right. But they're going to, at some level, flog the base. Okay. Now, here is the problem for them, and I'm not saying that they're going to lose. I'm not making some ultimate prediction here. The problem that they have is that on our side, our message, what you're going to hear from, what you heard from Ryan, what you're going to hear tonight from Romney, is that there are limits, and that there have to be limits, and that we cannot spend unlimitedly, and that we cannot indebt ourselves unlimitedly. Okay. At this moment, that is resonating deeply with our base, and it is motivating our base very well. The question is, will flogging the base for David and Barack Obama do as much with the middle as our message does with the middle? So back to your capacious capitalist criticism of Mitt Romney. I think the fact that substantially
we're talking perceptions here. So
right.
And I'm saying that's the one that.
And I'm not, for the sake of conversation, I'm going with it. I think that while people may have that in their mind, I think it's less than you might think, but I understand it's out there. It might be out there. The good news for our side this time is that in the middle there are a lot of folks who are deeply concerned about overspending, over-indebting.
I get that.
And so we have an entree into that group. Now, there are a lot more dynamics that we could get into, but that's why I'm taking
as is always the case,
comfort.
We've sort of got ourselves down to 5 minutes, which means that there's absolutely chance to. Well, there just is no chance to have this conversation.
We're doing a great job.
I was thinking, this is going to be really cool. Let's get Chris in here, and with a half an hour, we'll be able to debate all the big issues. And of course, we're not. We haven't even got close to it.
Because, like Johnny Carson used to say, you know the arguments, and I know the arguments, and that's why he was on TV for 30 years.
Right. The thing is that somehow or other, the Democratic Party has to repudiate this notion, or refudiate, I guess.
Refudiate.
They have to refudiate this
Invented
notion
by Ken
that
Davis.
we are broke and
Right.
that we can't spend any more money.
Okay.
Because that's just, not only is it wrong,
Okay.
it is antithetical to what the role of a government is supposed to be. And one of the questions that I had written down that I wanted to talk to you about
Go
today,
ahead. Yes.
but we just simply can't do it anymore because we won't be able to give it the full expansion that we need, is where is the line between the appropriate role for business and the appropriate role for government?
Okay.
That seems to be one of the issues that is being really argued here.
I brought my visual aid.
Oh, you have a visual aid. Oh, well, don't show it to me. Show it to the camera.
Well, hopefully there's a camera over here.
Somebody will get it. Yeah.
I
This
hope
is a
I've been on the
beautiful
program.
visual aid.
Maybe it's just been the Davis show with audio from Robling.
Okay, we'll put Chris on camera. Okay, yeah.
All right.
What is this?
Here is now.
Here is now.
That's then.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay. This is spending.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here is where we are, and that's supposed to be a straight line. It's not a Miesian straight line,
Yeah,
but you
right,
get the idea.
right.
That is a,
Yeah.
you're not dealing with Pythagoras here.
Yeah. Okay, we got it. Yeah. This was not
This is
computer generated.
Growth of government under the Democratic idea. And this is growth of government under the Republican idea. Why? Because things like, even though you snicker, Paul Ryan accepted Medicare in a very profound
Paul
way.
Ryan voted for every big spend. But you know what? I don't want to get into
Here's
those
another-
arguments.
but this
As
also
we know,
goes to
Paul
you.
Ryan voted for every one of those expansions. He's an opportunist. When he wants to be on one side, he's one. But you know,
Here's my second
what do they
visual
say in the
aid.
Senate? That is stipulated.
Okay.
Yeah. Here's another visual aid.
Here is
Okay.
all of economic activity.
Uh-huh.
All right, two sides.
Yeah.
This is the Democrat. This is the Republican.
Yeah,
Okay?
got it.
So under President Obama,
Uh-huh.
his answer to your question
Yeah.
has been something like 25%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 25%. Now, that's as of today. What you would see in terms of the budget projections is that with President Obama, this ends up going bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
Here's where the Republicans are. And we make no 20%.
You want to get it down? Yeah.
20%.
Yeah.
Now that's a very serious. A, it's a very serious difference. But B, you get 20%. You take up less, but you still grow the amount. Why? Because
that is going to be the Chris. We're down to seconds. That is going to be the thing. That is going to be the thing that those few people on the fence are going to be asked to decide. Does that really matter? And then, of course, there's the whole question about your party is basing its entire future on older white people, and they're not going to be around much longer. But
you're
that's
saying that at this moment when
Yeah,
we're
I
talking
know.
about the first Latina governor in American history and a Latino governor of Nevada and an Indian American
Yeah.
governor of South Carolina.
Yes, we are. Yes, in fact, we are.
African American congressman.
Look at the way they're waving at us.
They're
Like,
waving.
will you get off?
You mean? Oh my God.
Chris Robling, thank you so much for being with us today. And hey, I'm sorry I gave the guy a big pass, but you know he had some interesting stuff to say.
We'll both hear about it.
We are both going to be in so much trouble. You have been watching Chicago Newsroom. It's a community service of CAN TV. You can find us. When I get out of here, they're going to be.
This is not on tape, is it?
Yes, it is. You can watch this right here on cable, but you can also see us on. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next week on Chicago Newsroom. Bye.